I was born in 1994, and growing up, I had mostly with my mom, my grandmother. My father was in and out of prison for most of my life, and as a young child, the first time he went in, I was about three. And yeah, it was me, my mom, my sister. We lived in a small townhouse, and it was fairly regular at that point in my life. I had a really great friend who I met in kindergarten, and this was like a catalyst in my life who introduced me to playing soccer, which kind of carried me into a lot of different spaces. Brought me to California. It actually got me into college, and I got to travel the world a little bit playing, and even the country a lot. My senior year, I think I attended all of like 40 days of school. I was um, I was playing with a soccer team in San Diego, from Boise. So every weekend I would fly to San Diego and then fly with the team wherever we were playing that weekend. And yeah, so that's kind of like, I guess, high level overview of like what my life looked like. Um, Had transitioning into like early adulthood. Coming out of high school, I got into Cal State Northridge, where I got a full scholarship to play soccer. And so I enrolled, and I was actually 17 at the time. I graduated high school at 17. And so I arrived in Northridge a few weeks short of my birthday and started like just acclimating to the college life. And then during a Thanksgiving break, I was playing in an outside club tournament and I busted my knee. I did my ACL, my MCL, my meniscus, tore my whole knee apart. Yeah, it was like a year and a half recovery. So in Division One sports, especially in the U.S., if you can't play, you're not really of use to anybody. So I kind of was sidelined and neglected. My scholarship was pulled, so I couldn't afford. I was paying outside tuition, so I left school. And I would say this is like during a time like when my life started kind of like trending in a different direction. At that time, my dad had been out of prison for a few years, but unfortunately, a very like traumatic event happened during that year that would send him back to prison, where he's still there to this day. So I had like a really profound effect on like kind of my my outlook on life and where I was going. It kind of like made me think that like I was doomed, like to like kind of repeat his mistakes. So I started just not really caring, I guess would be a good way of putting it. Um, got dropped from the soccer team. Couldn't like keep weight, couldn't keep my fitness up, and yeah, I ended up on the streets. Had nowhere left to go, no family, no one would give me $1, which I mean I don't blame them, right? I wasn't true to my word, which is funny because like growing up, the one thing my grandmother always would tell me is like, if you have nothing else, you have your word, and your word is, your bind to everything. And if people can't trust that you're gonna say or you're gonna do what you say, then you're likely like you're not gonna make it very far in life. And so that had rang really true up until that point in my life. And yeah, so I ended up in Redding, California. I slept near a bus station for probably 6 months. I would sleep on friends' couches who lived in the area. I got a job flipping burgers and running a frying machine at one point, and this seemed to be like, wow, I'm like doing great. I was like, I finally had a couple bucks in my pocket. And this is like this really pivotal moment in my life where I would say, if you've heard the term rock bottom, this was pretty much rock bottom. It was scraping together enough dollars just to buy a burger. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely on my way to ending up like my dad. Like that was it. Like I was pretty sure at that point, if you would have asked me, if you would have talked to me, I would have been like, yeah, well, I'm just gonna be my dad. Like I'm gonna end up in jail. I'm gonna end up in prison. That's just my life, And I had met a girl in college at Chico, my son's mother, and so she was pregnant, and she told me, and she had moved back from Chico down here to the Bay Area with her family. And she was like, hey, look, like, I know we haven't really been in contact, we haven't really been speaking, but look, like, I'm gonna have this baby. I don't know how much you want to be involved. Um, if you don't, it's okay. If you do, like, let's figure it out, but I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And of course, at first, I was like, I was like, I can't even take care of myself. Like, what am I gonna do for this child? And yeah, I thought, like, maybe he's just better off without me. Like, it seemed like, and just to go like further back, like, my dad grew up with 11 brothers and sisters. 10 of them died from like overdoses, and one of them, yeah, is a result of like him not being here as a result of like something my dad did. So that just gives you like some more context about like the lineage of like my father's side. And my mother's side isn't much better. My mom is probably the first person in her family, my grandmother maybe, who really kind of tried to like recreate the narrative or pivot things to like give us, my sister, my brother, like a better life. But my dad's side of the family, like, and I think like at one point when after I found out my son was born, like pivoting back more toward what I was talking about, it gave me this insight where it's like I finally forgave him. And like when I forgave him, I like subconsciously kind of forgave myself for everything that had happened over those 5-6 years. And I picked myself off the street one day. I called my son's mother and I said like, okay, what do I need to do? And so I took all these steps. I got help. I found a place to live. I got myself off the street. I would work 50, 60 hours flipping burgers to spend my paycheck to take the Amtrak from Redding to Martinez, get off at Martinez, find my way to the BART station, take the BART all the way to Antioch, just to visit my son. And of course it wasn't like perfect from that point. Like there were still hiccups. There were still points where it's like I would get sucked back into like old habits. But the idea was like if I constantly kept moving forward, then eventually like I would find myself in a space where like I really wanted to be. Um, and so one thing led to the next, and I just kept trying to find the next opportunity. And really my North Star was my son. And I kept like, okay, I can just keep getting closer to him, like even physically, like moving. Like I ended up saving enough money and I convinced my aunt, who was living in Fremont, to let me stay on her couch. Cause I was like, okay, I'm spending way too much money on this train every month. And if I can live in Fremont, then that's just a BART ride to Antioch. It's no longer an Amtrak and it's no longer taking a week off work. So I lived on a couch and I worked in a Tesla factory. So I would wake up at 4 a.m. and I would bike 2 miles to the Tesla factory. I'd work overnight. I was putting like the wheel barrels on the wheels, right? And so manual labor, I'd work that for 12 hours. And so I'd get off, 5 or 6, and then I'd go to a serving job and I'd bartend until 2 a.m. I'd get a couple hours of sleep and I'd do it all over. And I saved enough money doing that to then afford to be able to buy a car. And then I rented a room from somebody. I found like my own space. And then eventually that turned into me being able to transition and get my own place in Walnut Creek, which was closer to my son. And I think that there is a pause there.
Absolutely.
Um,
This is incredible.
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, eventually I found myself in Walnut Creek. And I was a mile from my son. And so I, worked it was not obviously well received at first. Being completely transparent, the relationship between me and my son's mother had like deteriorated, and rightfully so. Like I don't blame her for not trusting me. I don't even resent the fact that she wanted to kind of protect our son. And like, honestly, maybe that was what was best for him. Cause I don't think at that point, even I was still ready to quite take responsibility for another person's life, my son's life. And eventually I met my wife, who's from Colombia. And she came here 5 years ago, lived in Chicago, and then she was out in Oakley, which is out past Antioch, as an au pair. So after my daughter was born, I looked my wife in the eyes and I said, like, I think I want to go back to school. And of course, like we have a newborn baby. My wife is not from here, so all of her family's in Colombia. Most of my family is in Boise, so it's really us just like tackling this whole thing together. And yeah, she looked at me and surprisingly she said, "Okay, do it," which was like, well, you know. And I guess like that was a moment that I had been searching for like a lot of my life was just this like um unconditional support, and like someone was like saw in me things that I couldn't see in myself. And yeah, for the first time I was like, okay, let's do this.